All right. Wonderful. Morning, Matt, and morning, everybody. It might be afternoon for some people. Who knows? Elizabeth, Coral. Hello, Coral. Crystal, Stephanie. Good. All right, darling people. So, I think, like we've been doing I've been doing my little session, touching on the points of the path to enlightenment, just kind of like listening to the points and contemplating the meaning. That's what they mean by when we hear in Tibetan Lam Rim meditation. It's like you take the essential points of the path and you just kind of like bullet points and you think of them, you think it through to the best of your ability, very brief. They call it a glance meditation, And because of karma, because everything we think stays in the mind, it leaves an imprint. So, it's a marvelous practice to do, actually, just even if you read one of those little Lam Rim prayers, just touch on the points of the path, each one. That leaves the imprint in the mind of the whole path. It's excellent. So I think maybe not. We won't do that today, though. We'll do one part of it. We'll do equanimity. Equanimity in the Bodhisattva path. We'll try that one. Just contemplate a few things. So we think just for this 30 minutes, we're here to think, analyze, contemplate these things, to leave the imprint in the mind so we can eventually experience the truth of these things. That's the point, So we can become our own marvelous person, develop our own natural potential for Buddhahood so we can be a benefit to others. I think that's why we're together for this 30 minutes. So, okay, so the first practice in the Bodhisattva path, the foundation, the starting point for the development of love and compassion, and then eventually bodhicitta. The starting point is this thought, this approach, this attitude. It's called equanimity. It's very specific. It's the heartfelt, when you've got it, once you've achieved it, it's this heartfelt recognition that friend, enemy, stranger, and the fact is, in the universe, there's no fourth category of sentient beings, because friend is an object of our attachment. Enemy, a person we don't like, is the object of our aversion. And stranger is the object of our indifference. So this heartfelt recognition that friend, enemy, and stranger are the same as each other from one point of view. That's it. And that point of view is simple, that each of them wants to be happy and each of them doesn't want to suffer. It's very simple. So why this? Because what we're trying to do is develop love and compassion, and then bodhicitta in this part of the path. Love is the delight in someone being happy, wanting them to be happy. Compassion is empathy with their suffering. I wish they didn't suffer. So what we love, then we want to try and develop this love for every being. No, that's the point. Everybody. Right now, it's only for the first category, pretty much. Look at the world. It's utterly natural. The ones we spend all our time loving, trying to make happy, having compassion for, helping, supporting. It's just so natural, we would think it'd be weird to do it for someone else. It's for our friends, our beloveds, the families, our partner, our pussycat. We focus on just a few. That's clear. Monkeys and dogs and ants and humans, all the same. So what's wrong with that? Well, nothing. It's marvelous to love somebody. It's marvelous to have compassion for somebody. The bigger picture here, the Buddha's point, is that everybody is the same. They all want to be happy. Everybody wants not to suffer. So why do we select just a few? That's the question. Well, because we have karmic connection with some people, due to virtue with them, and we become close. We, marry them or live with them or give birth to them or take care of them. So naturally they loom larger in our lives, but because that's not because they want to be happy. We don't love them because they want to be happy. We love them because they make us happy. That's attachment. So we have a vested interest in taking care of our beloveds. That's why we don't take care. Certainly we don't take care of the people who've harmed us. Don't love them. We don't want them to be happy. We don't want them not to suffer. Because why? Because they've hurt me. Because they don't do what my attachment wants. That's why we have aversion to them. So in other words, these viewpoints are completely self-centered. This sounds very shocking to us. It sounds shocking. This is so normal. But they're self-centered viewpoints. Necessarily, logically, they're self-centered. It's actually got not to do anything to do with the person. It's to do with me. And what about the third category, the third category, strangers? Well, that's 99.99% of the universe. How do we feel about them? Well, because they don't either help me or harm me, then our response is couldn't care. This is fact. It's just the world. And the reason for this friend, enemy, stranger, they're creations of delusions. They are fabrications. They're fabrications made up by my attachment. So those who help me, they're my beloveds. Those who make me happy, those who do what my attachment wants, then I adore them and I want them to be happy. And I will spend my life doing that. And that's marvelous. But the logic is wrong. The logic should be, I want you to be happy because you want to be happy. That's what equanimity is. Right now, our love it's got strings attached. Or as Lama Zopa says, it's unstable. That's why when the husband leaves you, the love turns up like a tap. We know that. So we see the entire world through the lenses of our own needs. It's just the world. It's just how it is at samsara. And it's quite shocking. It also sounds exhausting. You mean I have to love everybody? Well, that's what Buddha's saying we're capable of, but one step at a time. This is the compassion wing. This is more advanced. That's why the first level of practice is don't think about others yet. Just stop harming them because you don't want future suffering. That's junior school. That's abide by the laws of karma. Then the next level of practice is still about ourselves. It's to learn to look at the disturbing emotions, this attachment, aversion, and all the others, and see how painful they are, how they cause me so much suffering, and want to give them up. It's only then we go to the compassion wing and start to look at others like we're doing now. So in this, the series of steps that culminate in bodhicitta, this is the first one. We have to shift the reasoning, shift our logic for why we want others to be happy, which is love, and why we want others to not suffer, which is compassion. The logic now is I-based. So with that logic, we can only love a few people. And it'll keep changing, because when you leave me, you'll go into the enemy category. So it's not stable. I mean, this is huge. This is tremendous, Shouldn't take it lightly, this compassion wing. So what we're trying to prove to ourselves with equanimity is very precise. Love and compassion come later. This is the basis, a sound basis for properly growing love and compassion. We're trying to shift the reasoning. We're trying to get ourselves out of the equation. So in front of you, as we're discussing, have to the left a beloved. In front, a person you don't like, a person who's harmed you, a person who's hurt you. We've all got one of those, more than one. Right in the middle, right in front of you. And then to the right, a stranger, a person whose face you know just enough to put them there, but you've never had any contact. They've neither harmed nor helped you. That's 99.99% of the universe. So just, this logic we're using, we just try to think through this logic that we're using. So get yourself out of the equation and see these three people separately from you. Separately. So the simple one of equanimity is the heartfelt recognition that they each equally want to be happy. And they each equally don't want to suffer. That's what we're trying to prove. That's equanimity, precisely. So, let's prove it. One excellent way to prove it. Think that there's you, and then there's these three people in front. Now, think of each of these three people. They see you. The friend sees you as a friend, right? You're the friend for the friend. The enemy looks at you, and then you're probably their enemy as well. You probably left them, maybe. So they look daggers at you. And the stranger, because you've got no contact with the stranger, you've neither harmed nor helped them, then they see you as a stranger. So look how these three people see you, one person, but they see three people. If each wrote a description of you, you wouldn't recognize, would you? The friend would talk about this divine person. The enemy would talk about this mean person. And the stranger would talk about this boring person. Who's that person? I don't know her. Think about this. So you're all three. You're a friend, an enemy, and a stranger. Now, check this. In your heart, when your friend looks at you with, starry-eyed, just check yourself. You want to be happy every second. Whether they look at you with starry eyes or not is not relevant. You want to be happy every second. You don't want to suffer every second. It's what drives every living being. Now look at your enemy looking at you. They might think you're the worst person on the planet. That has got nothing to do with you. Every second, you only want to be happy. Every second, you only don't want to suffer. And the stranger, the same. They see somebody boring, but that's not relevant to you. Inside, you're exactly the same. Well, that's exactly how it is for everybody. But all we see is our projections. All we see is the story that we have made up. That's the point. This is what Buddha's saying. We don't see reality at all. We have all our own stories in our head, and they're the lenses through which we see the world. And from the point of view of those people out there, your view has no basis. because each is an exaggeration. Each is a distortion. Attachment causes the friend to look totally divine. Aversion causes the enemy to be totally ugly. Indifference causes the stranger to be totally boring. It is projections. Nothing to do with the simple fact that in their hearts, they only want to be happy. They only don't want to suffer. But to be rigorous. These meditations on the compassion wing aren't sentimental, kind of wishy-washy. They're using rigorous logic to argue with ego's misconceptions, to come to some sound conclusions. So you are a friend, an enemy, and a stranger simultaneously. And there's not a fraction of difference in how you feel every second. How they see you is their business, you know. So what's one of the problems with this is as soon as we say, you know, let's say you think of an enemy, person who's has really definitely harmed you, and there's no argument, they harmed you. And you say, they want to be happy. The first thing we say is, what do you mean they want to be happy? They don't deserve to be happy. And this deserve is the basis of whether we love or don't love somebody. It's totally contingent on that. That's so heavy. Deserve, in other words, is if they're nice to me, I'm prepared for them to be happy. I mean, this is shocking. So self-centered. This is the point. They don't deserve it. It's got nothing to do with it. It's not relevant. One way Buddha says is every being is simply driven constantly by the wish to be happy and not suffer. You could argue the whole Buddhist path is methodology to achieve that. You know? Everyone is driven by this naturally. Every ant, every dog, every psychopath, every rapist, every saint. And that's what drives, you know, that's what drives our actions. The rapist thinks by raping, they'll get happy. The thief thinks by stealing, they'll get happy. That's the tragedy. But they're driven by the wish to be happy, driven by the wish not to suffer. This is the starting point for the development of the stages on the compassion wing. This is the starting point, the foundation, the basis. Because then we start the techniques that build on that, you know, step after step after step. There's two systems. I think Geshe-la's teaching on one at the moment, 6 causes and 1 effect, or the 7 point something. I'm not sure. Maybe it's something else. I'm not sure. But each of these steps leads us gradually to actually cultivate the genuine love for every living being, but based upon this foundation, because they want to be happy and have compassion for every living being, because they don't want to suffer. So this is tough. Just the thought, we're not developing love and compassion yet. We're talking about just equanimity, just this recognition. So how do you practice in day-to-day life? Every second we could practice it. You know, you got a grandchild or something, and you adore your beloved grandchild. Of course, you see them through the starry eyes of attachment. They're heavenly to you. And there's a smelly kid next door. You can't stand him. He's mean, and he might be mean. No one's saying he's not mean. But that means you have aversion for him, which means you don't want him to be happy. And we even have to struggle with our enemies to want them not to suffer. We have to struggle against that, to not want them to suffer. You know? So equanimity, right there, you see them playing, and you have this, you know, love for your beloved and this aversion for this other kid. Right that second, you say, Robina, They're equal. They both want to be happy. That little smelly kid has the same yearning in his heart to be happy, just like my beloved. That's equanimity. So what's the consequence of that? Well, and suddenly, one of the consequences, you suddenly start to, there's a tiny shift in the view of the smelly kid. You begin to see the humanity, just a tiny shift. Equanimity is specifically the recognition that all the friends, all the enemies, and all the strangers are equal in their, from one point of view only. I mean, they could be equal from many points of view, but this is the one point. They're equal in their wish to be happy and not suffer. And that's what we're trying to prove. We have to prove it, the truth of it. It's not an emotional feeling, it's logic. So there's the example of yourself being all three. That's powerful. You know, you can see that's true. Whoever's looking at you does not shift your wish to be happy every second. So, of course, again, the naive way we think of it, well, if that smelly kid wants to be happy, let him do what he likes. No, that's not the conclusion. He might be mean. He might hit your grandchild unfairly. So you have to watch like a hawk and be sensible. But it's understanding what drives everybody. And then when we understand that sentient beings have delusions and that's why they harm each other, then you can begin to have compassion. But the fundamental point of equanimity is recognizing this equality from this one point of view, driven by the wish to be happy and driven by the wish not to suffer. And we can see how irrational friend, enemy, stranger are. This is the point. They're just these projections we've made up. You know, there's Fred, a stranger. How do you know the guy? Couldn't care less. You hear about him down the road, the fellow down the road. He's got a headache. You've heard about he's got headaches. You try to have compassion, but it doesn't touch you because he's a stranger. You think about it for about a half a second, then it disappears from your mind. That's a stranger. Try to have compassion, but you can't sustain it because there's no relationship. You're indifferent. Then you meet Fred and you fall in love. Now what happens? Fred moves over from the stranger category to the beloved category. And now you think of him all day. Suddenly your love goes berserk. And you do have love for him. You never stop. You're kind, looking after him. You have compassion. You think about him all the time. Such love, such compassion have now grown in your heart. Why? Because of attachment. His headache was just as bad when he was your stranger as it is now when he's your friend. But look how concerned you are about his headache now. You worry about it, think about him. How come before you didn't? His headache was no different because he was not your friend, because he wasn't loving you. You had no vested interest. Ego couldn't care. This is how we are. And then he leaves you, and now he goes into the enemy category. May he smile. And now you have to struggle to not want him to suffer with his headaches. You're angry with him now. He deserves his headaches. Look at us, how unstable we are. All based on whether or not a person is nice to me. It's totally self-centered. Fred's headache was just as bad whether you labeled him friend, enemy, or stranger. He wanted only to be happy every second, and he wanted only not to suffer. This is what we're trying to show. And again, it's not sentimental. Just because the person wants to be happy, like to say that rapist wants to be happy, you don't pat him on the head and think, oh, poor thing, he wants to be happy. Let him do what he likes. That's not the conclusion at all. It's a very fundamental, specific point. And then on top of that, we begin to develop love, compassion, great compassion, bodhicitta, which is mixed with wisdom, which knows how, which causes you to know how to help people, how to love them. So if you have a genuine wish, that's like if you're a good parent, you want your child to be happy, then one day you will use kind methods. You'll be sweet and kiss them. But another day when they're naughty, you'll be tough with them. But there's no difference in your reason. There's no difference in your logic. Each of them is driven by your wish they be happy. Whereas now we just follow aversion and attachment. So if we trust, for example, let's say we have a relationship with a teacher, our Lama. This is a tough one for us because attachment only wants to hear sweet words. So if our teacher, whom we trust, our Lama, let's say, whom we trust, we've decided, we've chosen our teacher. And one day they say sweet words, and the next day they say tough words. We have to trust that they're coming from the same place. Their love for me, their wish for me to be happy, using their wisdom to know how to help me. We have to trust that. That's difficult because attachment only wants to be stroked. Equanimity. Just have to look at the stranger. You know, you read the newspaper, you read the paper, and you hear about strangers. I mean, hearing about these strangers, you know, in Afghanistan, you know. I mean, of course, we see such moving images these days. It's easy to be moved with compassion. But it's not the same as if it were our friend. And friend is based on family, race, you know, nationality, football teams, you name it. My people, you know. We feel closer to my people. This is the way delusions are. So let's think, you know, this in front of us, our beloved to the left, the enemy in front, and the stranger to the right. Just sort of consciously have this sense of moving yourself out of the view, you know, to see these three people as equal to each other from this one point of view. And just aspire. May I develop this equanimity, get myself out of the equation, see people from their side, and then develop as we go on the compassion. We develop alongside it the wisdom to know how to be of benefit to sentient beings. That's the skill we need. All right, sweethearts. A few thoughts for the day. Gone like a dream. 30 minutes. Just like it started a second ago, didn't it? A second ago, I said good morning. Look at it. 30 whole minutes. It's hard to imagine, isn't it? So life is moving fast. Don't waste it. Make the most of each second. Much love. Thank you.